Hi, I'm Jaclyn.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes.
Welcome back to what's just another episode for you guys because we recorded ahead of time, so you're welcome. But Courtney and I have not recorded a regular episode in a few weeks, so we may be a little bit rusty, but we're very excited to be back, and we hope you guys are very excited that you didn't have to miss an episode. So, yeah.
And hopefully we did a good job of, not making it seem like, we were recording 5 episodes in 2 weekends, and it felt like, oh, this is totally updated and totally recorded yesterday. Just kidding. We're not one of those podcasts. We have full-time jobs.
Yeah, we don't do that. So if any, true crime updates or any big news things happened in the last month that we've missed, we're sorry because again, we recorded a whole bunch of episodes in one weekend and then have not recorded anything since. So if there was anything that we missed, it was not intentional, and hopefully from here on out we'll be able to hit all those highlights again.
Yeah, definitely.
And super exciting news, we do have a new Patreon subscriber, so thank you so much, James, for subscribing. We really appreciate it. We hope that you enjoy all of that bonus content and other fun goodies that we have over there. Just a reminder, if you guys are interested, you could go to patreon.com/caffeinatedcrimes if you want to hear us even more or talk to us or join our fun Discord channel or all those fun things. Make sure you do that.
And if you're a current Patreon, please join the Discord channel.
Please. Yes, please.
Please.
It's just me and Courtney right now.
Yeah, it's just us, and we don't talk because, well, we already have 7 other different platforms we talk on. So
yes, and we do talk on all of them, often at the same time. So yeah. We'll have a separate conversation going on in a text message and on Instagram and all the different
Snapchat
places. So
and yeah.
Yes.
And speaking of true crime updates that may have gone missed, right after we finished recording, it was announced that Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell were officially indicted on murder charges. And then there's been just so much news since then, so we decided to go ahead and include that because just a few days ago she was found mentally unfit to stand trial. From the article I saw, it looks like that is on the concealment of evidence charges, not necessarily the murder charges, which is weird and odd, and I'm not a lawyer, so don't ask me any more questions about it.
Yeah, it seems very strange that it would apply to one charge and not another. But if you guys are a lawyer and you know how that works, let us know because we're interested.
Yeah, and so she is going to be sentenced to a mental health facility for 90 days. Maybe not sentenced is the best word, or just going there to be monitored and treated. She was in March apparently evaluated for her competency, and a psychologist didn't think she was competent to stand trial. So they're just gonna kind of monitor that, maybe give her the help she needs or the therapy or the medicine she needs, and it can affect her murder charges. So she was indicted, but looks like she might not ever go to trial for it. But Chad Daybell should.
Yep.
At least
someone should.
Yeah. Which I can kind of, because people said before that she was very with the whole doomsday thing, and maybe she was having some kind of mental break, but I don't think it was just completely that. So,
I mean, because she did think that her kids were zombies, so I feel like there's some, accuracy to that, but at the same time, it's you murdered your children, you hid their bodies, you
went to Hawaii
and got married. Yeah, you evaded police, you made up all these lies. It's a little bit more intricate, I feel than just that,
Yeah, and there's also was it her brother or her husband or both, and Chad Daybell's wife, all the other people in their lives who have apparently mysteriously died. So hopefully she'll stand trial because she deserves it, and if not, maybe she'll just be in a mental health hospital forever and never get to go out. So hopefully it's one of those.
Yeah, somewhere where we can make sure that she does not reproduce again and does not have this happen again, for sure. And in other news, about 10-ish months ago, we did an episode on Krista Pike. So it was a while ago, but just recently, the state of Tennessee is trying to set an execution date for her. So no date has been set, but they are trying to get that in the works. And her defense team is also arguing mental competency. So we'll see what happens with that if they end up going through with it. She has been on death row for going on 30 years. Almost 30 years.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the crime happened in like the 90s.
Yeah,
that's
I was thinking like
maybe.
I was thinking 95-ish, somewhere around there. So she's been on death row for multiple decades. So we'll see what happens with that and if they go forward with that.
But yeah, I don't know if I said it in the Krista Pike episode or not, but I do think, like, I honestly thought they were just going to let her, like, die in prison. Like, she was just going to be on death row until she died, even though that's going to be probably years. But
yeah,
because that happens so often. But now it seems like they're really pushing for that. So that'll be pretty interesting to see, which, I mean, obviously she had issues in jail as well, so I don't think she's reformed, but she could just stay in prison for the rest of her life because, I mean, just put her away.
Yeah. I wonder if there's any, like, reason that they're pushing for that now, because I feel like usually that comes about, like, election time or some time where they need to, like, stir the pot and, like, get people on their side. You know, I don't know. It just seems like a very random time all of a sudden for them to do that. I don't know.
But we'll let you know if anything further comes from that, whether they set the date, whether it happens, whether they get it not to happen, anything. We'll keep an eye on it.
Yes.
But I think that's all we have.
I think that's all we have. Go
have a cup of coffee. No, I'm just kidding. No, we will get into today's episode now that we have talked for a little bit. So our sources for today are an episode of the Red-Handed podcast, an ABC News article, the Illinois Innocence Project, and that is on the University of Illinois Springfield's website, so it's kind of like an article within them, and also a Northwestern Law article. So around 4 a.m. on October 13th, 1997, in Lawrenceville, Illinois, 28-year-old single mom and PhD student Julie Rae Harper woke up to the sound of screaming in her home. So she did live alone with her 10-year-old son Joel, and she went looking for him and calling his name. When she got to his bedroom, she discovered his bed was empty, and when she turned, she came face to face with a masked intruder with a knife. She fought with the intruder and chased him through her house. So she grabbed onto his leg, and he dragged her on her knees across the carpet before they eventually broke through the 2 glass doors and into her backyard.
Which, think about, like, the amount of force that you must be struggling to break through your glass doors. Like, that is crazy.
Yeah. That is, like, super crazy. And to be, like, dragged around carpet, that's painful.
Definitely.
So the intruder pushed her to the ground and hit her repeatedly in the back of the head and shoved her face into the ground. So Julie continued to scream for help, and while she lay on the ground bleeding, the intruder calmly walked away and removed his mask under a nearby street lamp. Which, come on, dude. Under a street lamp?
Right.
Like, right where everyone can see you? Dude.
That's where you decide to remove. And that just seems very, like, movie-esque, you know? Like, oh, like, the killer's, like, walking away and removed his mask under the street light, and very odd.
So Julie ran to her neighbor's house screaming for help, and her neighbor reported that she opened the door to Julie around 4:30 a.m. in her underwear and a t-shirt, looking frantic, saying that Joel was gone. So police quickly arrived and found Julie with a bruise over her eye and a cut on her arm. And Julie believed that the man had kidnapped her son, but while searching her home, police found Joel's body between his bed and his wall in his bedroom. He'd been stabbed 12 times in the chest. And Julie was obviously inconsolable when told her son was dead, because after everything you've just been through, and now your son's dead, like, that's a very traumatic night.
Yeah.
So Julie had to receive medical attention for her injuries and was taken to the hospital for stitches, along with treatment of other minor cuts, bruises, and carpet burn on her knees. And Julie provided a description of the intruder to police. and her description remained consistent throughout several interviews with police. And there were no signs of forced entry at the home, and the murder weapon appeared to be a knife from their own kitchen. So I think we can all see where this is going.
Yes. Which, I mean, granted, the knife from the own kitchen is very suspect.
Yeah, that's very weird. Mm-hmm. So both Julie and Joel's father, Lynn Kirkpatrick, were questioned. So Julie and Lynn had a bitter divorce, and they shared custody of Joel. But Joel spent more time at Lynn's house than at Julie's house. So as we mentioned, Julie was finishing her PhD in psychology, so she had a pretty long commute during the week, and she usually only saw Joel on the weekends. Lynn was a police officer and was quickly ruled out as a suspect in his son's murder because he was working that night. And then Lynn immediately suspected Julie of murdering Joel, and he believed if she couldn't have him all the time, she didn't want to have, anyone to have him. Mm-hmm. Which, I wonder if this was, a fight before, because they kind of made it seem like she mostly didn't have custody of him, the majority of the time, because she just literally, did not have time.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what happened before this?
It's did something
triggered
else...
that?
Yeah, did something else lead up to those arrangements? I mean, it's a pretty strong suggestion for your son to be murdered, and your first thought is, oh, my ex-wife did it. That's not usually someone's first thought, I feel like. Someone that you at one point chose to marry and have a child with. Even if you had a bitter divorce and, this custody battle and everything, it still seems like a big leap for if nothing had happened previously, like you said.
Yeah, and I want to know, did Julie say something like this before that just was never, reported? Or, I don't know. Maybe there's something else there that led him to that conclusion, but it is, a big jump.
Maybe some, random comment in the middle of an argument about whatever. Something that just kind of, comes out that isn't really thought through or something.
Mm-hmm. So the investigators working the case also believe that Julie was responsible. Instead of looking for fingerprints or trace evidence in Joel's room, they searched for signs that Julie had tried to wash away Joel's blood by inspecting all of her drains. And they also dug up her septic tank and sprayed luminol all over the house, and they didn't find anything. So,
which is pretty concrete evidence, I feel like.
Yeah. I find it odd. I find it obviously, neither of us are crime scene investigators or detectives, but, you aren't supposed to go in with a bias. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to go in and just look at the crime scene and figure out what happened. And if what happened and all the evidence leads to Julie, okay, you have a suspect. But you shouldn't be okay, it's Julie, now let's find evidence to prove that. That's not how you work an investigation.
Yes, and, I'm going to look for bloodstains in the sink drains, which would indicate someone who lived in the home, but I'm not going to look for fingerprints, which would indicate someone that did not. It's just very, like you said, they went in with the suspect in mind and tried to find evidence to support that, which, is how a lot of people form their opinions about everything when they do their online research, so...
That's true. You just try to find whatever supports your claim, even if it's from, I don't know, I'm trying to think of one of those, even just from, theonion.com. You're see?
I remember this.
Totally real.
It's meme, I guess. I don't know, whatever, that I saw one time that was someone that's I'm trying to, find evidence in scientific journals to support my claim of, I can't remember what it was, but it doesn't seem to exist. Does anyone have any ideas? And it's yeah, it doesn't exist. That's the, no.
Yeah. And that's the thing, too, is it's if all of your evidence is pointing to Julie, because it is kind of weird, stranger crime doesn't happen as often as we think it does, but you're not actually working the crime scene, which is a problem. But we've seen a lot of police issues forever. It sucks. Anyway.
And we didn't really touch on the fact that her ex-husband was a police officer, so I'm sure that plays a big role in this because he claimed it was her, so they're already going in backing him up.
Yeah.
Obviously against her. That plays a role in this.
Which also, I do know he was working, and I'm sure there's some, record, but if you're working like the night shift, like how often, especially in the 90s, do they keep track of you? Like, could you slip away for an hour on your lunch break? Or, I mean, just reasonable doubt in there. That's all I'm doing. I'm not saying it was him. I'm just like bringing up a conversation.
Yeah, and if you're like a patrolman, I mean, I don't know exactly what he did with the police department, but if you're a patrolman and you're just driving around, then you don't have like specific record of your movements. You know, it's not like, oh, I clock in and out at this time at this place.
Yeah.
Like, I was definitely here. It's like you literally just drive around and kind of look for things, look for speeders, see if anyone needs help, which, you know.
If you get a call,
Yeah.
you know, oh, I got to go here, or, and we know how the police cover for each other as well. Again, we're not saying he did it. We're just saying how the flawed logic.
Yes, we're just saying that there were other things that should have been looked into versus immediately suspecting Julie.
So there was very little physical evidence at the crime scene, and the few leads police had were quickly ruled out. And nothing definitive like pointed to Julie, and the state's attorney actually refused to press charges because there was just a lack of evidence, because it's like, this is a waste of time, and if we go to trial, like, she's probably not going to be found guilty, and then double jeopardy, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
However, Special State Prosecutor Ed Parkinson firmly believed that Julie had murdered her son and requested to take on the case. And he was quoted saying, "To believe her, you would have to believe that this assailant came into her home in the middle of the night, in dark clothes, hiding his identity by use of a mask, for the sole purpose of killing a 10-year-old boy. And after he accomplished his result, he pulled off his mask to reveal his identity to her. Nonsense."
And again, very strange that the regular state prosecutor would refuse to open this case, and then here comes this guy who clearly has a vendetta against this woman because, for whatever reason, who wants to prosecute this case. It's very weird. I don't think I've ever heard of that in other cases.
And yeah, and I don't think the intruder was like purposefully revealing his identity. I think he probably thought she was like mostly dead. Like, if he's beating her in the back of the head and walking away, he's probably thinking he's leaving her dead. Like, he would not leave unless he probably thought she was dead.
And we said at the beginning that it would be weird that he would pull his mask off under a streetlight. But, you know, maybe once he reached that streetlight, he's like, oh shit, I very obviously look like I just did something, so let me take this off now to blend in.
True.
In case someone sees me. So, I mean, that would make the most sense to me.
Yeah. So in June 2000, criminal defense investigator Bill Clutter was contacted by criminal defense attorney Catherine Lyle. So Catherine Lyle explained her client would soon be indicted for the murder of her son, and that police had never investigated any alternative suspects in the case. And after providing the details of Julie's versions of events, Bill Clutter believed the murder were similar to those of a child serial killer who'd recently been arrested in Texas. So Tommy Lynn Sells had confessed to multiple murders with the same MO, breaking into homes and stabbing children, and Clutter suggested that Lyle look into Sells as a possible suspect in Joel's murder, because it's like, you know how the prosecutor said nobody just comes into a house and kills boys? Well, here is somebody who does that.
Yes, someone who very recently did that.
So in October of 2000, which is 3 years after her son's death, Julie Rae was indicted for the murder of 10-year-old Joel. She continued to maintain her innocence and spent all of her savings on her legal defense. And because she was charged with capital murder in Illinois, she was now facing the death penalty. Then in March of 2001, new laws were passed that would require those being charged with a capital offense to be given 2 capital qualified attorneys, which seems like a pretty good law.
Yeah.
So there were also the Capital Litigation Trust Fund that would provide money to investigators to investigate claims of innocence before the trial.
So they're really trying to make sure with these laws that people who are sentenced to death truly had every resource possible to prove their innocence. So like Courtney said, I feel like that's definitely a good law to have in place that other places should have as well.
Yeah, and not just for people who were like being wrongfully confused, but also for taxpayers and their money, because if you don't have a good defense attorney and you're found guilty, and then your appellate attorney comes in and is like, hey, they had a bad defense, and then you get a new trial, so then you're having to spend more money and get more jurors and another judge. So in the long run, it benefits everybody.
Yes, 100%.
So Julie petitioned to secure these attorneys and to access the funds, but the prosecutors then announced they'd no longer be seeking the death penalty. You know how you always have that one person who just has to ruin everything? Mm-hmm. You just gotta ruin a good time. Good time loosely used here.
Julie's not having a good time.
No. But she was about to have so many resources available to her, and they ripped it away.
Yep.
So this meant Julie would lose access to all of these resources that were only available to those facing a death sentence. So Julie now only had a single public defender to aid in her defense, and there would be no investigating other possible suspects, such as Tommy Linsells, without these resources, since Julie had already spent all of her savings. So...
And I feel like that was very intentionally done, too. I don't think these people all of a sudden were like, oh, we don't believe in the death penalty anymore for this person that we think murdered their 10-year-old son. That's not what it was. It was, oh, we don't want her to have access to all these resources that she may get off on this, so we're going to not seek that, so now she's stuck.
Yeah, and this is just another example of the justice system just kind of being fucked in the U.S., and... obviously, in this case, it was not innocent until proven guilty. Like, they legitimately were like, she's guilty. Let's do everything we can to just, like, make it official.
Yep.
So, Julie did remarry in 2001 to a man named Mark Harper. And Mark actually went to law school to help aid in Julie's defense, which that is true love. I hope Kevin will go to law school and help me if this ever happens.
I mean, talk about relationship goals right there.
Yeah, for real. So although the state only had circumstantial evidence, they went to trial in the spring of 2002. The prosecution claimed that Julie murdered Joel for revenge against her ex-husband Lynn. And they also said there were no signs of forced entry or fingerprints on the knife, even though it was later determined that this knife was not actually the murder weapon.
Yup.
So... also, another, point in Julie's defense, this was also the 90s and people didn't lock their doors, and I'm assuming this is small town Illinois. Mm-hmm. People don't lock their fucking doors.
Yeah.
Lynn testified that Julie had considered an abortion when pregnant with Joel, but I don't think that matters right now, 10 years later.
Those aren't the same things.
I know women who have, talked about how when they got pregnant off of a one-night stand, how they legitimately thought about having an abortion and then chose not to, and now they love their kid more than anything in the world. Mm-hmm. So it's that doesn't mean you're 10 years later you're gonna kill your kid.
Choosing to have an abortion does not equate to murdering an actual 10-year-old human being at all.
Yeah. You already got through the newborn phases. You're not gonna, you were in the easy part. You're in the home stretch. You're not gonna...
He's just hanging out in his room playing his Nintendo all day. You're good.
And also, because there was this divorce, if she did not want him, she did not have to have him. She only saw him weekends. Mm-hmm. It wasn't I'm the sole provider. No one else can, take care of my kid. She could theoretically just never see him again if she wanted to. He's old enough. She didn't have to do anything.
Yeah. And it was the 90s, but also insane that this is even allowed at trial. That's completely irrelevant. That has nothing to do with this case. It's absurd that they would allow that to be brought in.
If I was her lawyer, I would say objection. Relevance, judge. Anyway. Sustained. Anyway.
Yes, Counselor Courtney.
So Julie's OB testified that Julie was actually on bed rest at the end of her pregnancy to make sure that her son would be born full term.
Yeah, so even if she had considered abortion early on, which again doesn't matter, when it got close to time, she was actually doing all of these things to make sure that her son would be okay. So if she, in whatever reason, has been trying to find a way to murder her son for the last 10 years, maybe she would have started then instead of... It's just crazy.
Yeah.
So the prosecution also used bloodstain pattern analysis to claim that a small spot of blood on Julie's shirt proved that she had killed Joel and that the crime scene in Joel's bedroom had been staged. So they said that the blood was consistent with Julie stabbing Joel and it coming back and landing on her shoulder, but they didn't provide any details on why that is. So they were just like, this means that this happened. The end. They didn't have charts and graphs to say this is exactly how it happened and it couldn't have happened any other way. There were no details provided. They just said, this is how it is, and it was accepted because they were the analysts. Mm-hmm. They also claimed that the blood patterns did not indicate that a third party was present. Again, with no details. And also, we know that bloodstain pattern analysis isn't always accurate, or ever, but not a great piece of evidence.
Yeah.
So the defense argued that Joel's blood on her shirt came from her fight with the intruder who stabbed Joel, and that there's no way that she would have such minimal blood on her if she was the one who had stabbed Joel, especially because they had already checked all of her drains and her septic tank and found no traces of blood having been washed away. So, again, this is just absurd. How can you expect her? He was stabbed, 12 times? This is going to be a very gruesome crime scene. She is going to be covered in his blood, and if there's proof that she didn't wash it away at home, where did it go? Where did you wash away? I mean, even if you, I don't know, left to throw out your clothing and then came back and then claimed that all of this happened, you would still have to wash it off of your body. It just doesn't make any sense. And Julie's defense team made the decision for her to not testify at trial. This would prove to be detrimental to her case because the jurors really wanted to hear from her. And one juror was quoted saying, "I need to hear her tell me that story. I looked at her for 2 weeks, stared her in the eyes for 2 weeks. I wanted her to tell me that story." So they wanted to hear from her directly, but we do know that sometimes the defense has to pick which tactic they think is going to work in their client's favor. So they did choose to not have her testify.
And that is hard too, because once you go to cross-examination, you can make yourself look really bad if you're not prepared and you're really emotional because you're, if you're innocent, you're trying to prove your innocence, and that can actually look bad if you lose your temper. It's very, very tricky to actually testify.
Yeah, and people are so good at, and by so good I mean really bad, but they like to interpret other people's behavior. Mm-hmm. So if you're being cross-examined and you're looking away, you're fidgeting, you're any of these little behavior tics that happen when you're nervous, when you're traumatized, whatever it may be, people like to interpret that a certain way, which can also be detrimental to your case. So it's really, you have to decide what you think is going to work best here. And I'm pretty sure that a mother being cross-examined about the murder of her son would be likely to be emotional. So yeah. I can see why the defense attorney was like, this probably isn't a good idea. But on March 4th, 2002, Julie Rae Harper was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 65 years in prison. Then on May 31st, just a couple of months after Julie was convicted, ABC 2020 aired a special about Julie's case. So crime writer Diane Fanning watched this special and noticed similarities to the Tommy Lynn Sells murders. She had been writing letters back and forth with him as part of a book that she was writing. So she included in her letter the general details of the murder and asked him if this was him. So Sells responded and asked if it occurred 2 days before the murder he committed in Springfield, Missouri, and it did. So Bill Clutter, along with Downstate Illinois Innocence Project, led the investigation and found witnesses who had seen Sells around Lawrenceville, Illinois, around the time of Joel's murder. So this information, along with Sells having details about the murder that no one else could know, was presented to the Prisoner Review Board. Which, what a crazy, chain of events for this to, happen the way it did.
And talk about the biggest amount of reasonable doubt you can have in a case where you already have no evidence.
Yeah, right? Hello. So, on November 6, 2003, the Prisoner Review Board sent an Illinois prosecutor and police sergeant to Texas to talk to Sells. So, Sells confessed and gave details that hadn't been released to the media. Sells said that he had gotten into a confrontation with Julie at a convenience store earlier that day, and he said, quote, "I followed the woman from the convenience store to a driveway she pulled into, and I hung around for several hours until the wee hours of the morning. Then I went into the house. I go to the first bedroom. I see, I don't know whose room it is, and I start stabbing. I went in, and I don't know if it was her room. I don't know if it was his room. I just know I wanted to go in there and hurt someone. So that was his statement about this. He said that he had gotten the knife from the knife block in the kitchen. And this wasn't the first time that Sells had chosen a victim after an altercation in public. Sells said that Julie fought with him and that she had grabbed his leg and he dragged her on her knees outside. So this is matching exactly the story that Julie provided to police years earlier, right after her son's murder.
Like, identical.
Yes, exactly. And this statement also matched her injuries, including the carpet burn on her knees. So clearly this guy knows something about this murder. Mm-hmm. Overall, there were 53 points of corroboration in Sells' confession of Joel's murder. However, Sells got a few things wrong all these years later, so prosecutors threw out this confession.
Which also, Tommy Lynn Sells murdered, what was it, like 30 people? It was a lot of people.
A lot.
A lot of people across a lot of different states. I'm sure he was not always sober. I'm sure he was not always in a, healthy mental state. Of course, you might forget details of your, I did this, 20 times. And you're like, oh, well, I think I did this that time. I don't know. Maybe I did this. Oh, I don't know. That doesn't mean it's not true.
Right?
When you already have all this that matches.
Yeah, he still provided so many points that lined up with what happened, with Julie's statement of what happened. Again, this is all the reasonable doubt you need. That's what our justice system is based off of. It's not that you can prove someone's innocence, but you have to prove reasonable doubt, which is clearly here in this case. This investigation led to the Downstate Innocence Project receiving information that key evidence was withheld from the defense. So they're about to get some more information that shows how fucked up her first trial was. Mm-hmm. So Dennis York, a Lawrence County Sheriff deputy and the first officer on the scene the night of Joel's murder, had been interviewed on tape the morning after the crime. And on this tape, he says that he went straight into the house when he arrived. However, he testified at trial that when he arrived, he searched the backyard for footprints or other signs of an intruder based on Julie's story. He says that the grass was wet and he used his flashlight and he was unable to see any footprints. So at trial, he's claiming that he looked for the intruder based on what Julie said, but when he was interviewed right after, he said that he just went straight into the house. So the testimony at trial was used by the prosecution to claim that there were no signs of an intruder. And the tape where York does not mention searching the yard for signs of an intruder was not presented to the defense. And Julie's neighbor also contradicted York's statement at trial and said that the grass was dry that morning. And Julie's wonderful new husband, Mark Harper, contacted a meteorologist who pulled records from that day and found that the grass would not have had any dew that morning. So Dennis is a liar.
And I also wonder, is they say there's no sign of forced entry, which I brought up, the door could have been unlocked. But also in Julie's statement, they smashed through glass doors.
Yeah.
What if there was evidence of forced entry and it was ruined when you smashed through the glass doors?
Yeah, that is a very, very good point.
Again, just some reasonable doubt to throw in here. Just a little sprinkle on top.
Just a little bit more in case you needed a little extra. So the Center on Wrongful Conviction at Northwestern University and Chicago law firm Schiff Hardin agreed to represent her appeal pro bono. On June 24th, 2004, the appellate court overturned Julie's conviction and she was released. Then, as she was literally walking out of prison, on the prison grounds, she was arrested again. Y'all, this blows my fucking mind. What?
Also that, the original prosecutor or the original whatever state attorney was like, I'm not taking this case. There's nothing. And only one attorney was like, I'm taking it. And now, all these years later, they're like, nope, we're getting her again.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Crazy. How do you not see the reasonable doubt here? So, her supporters immediately raised money for her to be released on bail. And in 2006, she went to trial again for the murder of her son. Her second trial now. And the court ruled that Tommy Lynn Sells' confession would be permitted and that the damaging character testimony from her ex-husband would not. So we're making some progress here in the 2000s. Thank God.
Yes.
And the defense argued at trial that police had clearly solely focused on Julie from the very beginning and did not even pursue any other suspects or collect evidence at the scene that would point to an intruder. And this time, Julie also took the stand herself, and the jury saw her as a distraught mother. And this time, the jury did acquit. So on November 29th, 2010, Julie Rae Harper was granted a certificate of innocence and awarded $87,057 from the Illinois Court of Claims. She now suffers from anxiety and PTSD and says her time spent in prison was very traumatic.
Which, think about, like, jailhouse justice. If you're known for murdering your own 10-year-old kid,
exactly,
you're low on the totem pole.
Exactly. She did not provide details, but she did say that being accused of stabbing your own child was, quote, considered to be one of the unforgivable sins to both guards and other inmates. So, yeah, something that other people are like, no, we're not going to put up with this. Julie speaks a lot at victim advocacy events and takes her German Shepherd support dog with her everywhere she goes because, again, she obviously suffers from a lot of mental health issues after this ordeal. Mm-hmm. After her acquittal, she believed that she would be able to go back to school and try to move on with her life, but clearly found it very difficult to find employment after telling her story to explain the gaps in her resume. I mean, you know, you're hiring someone and she's like, yeah, I spent all this time in prison for murdering my son and I went to trial again, and just this poor woman, like, her marriage to Mark Harper also dissolved. I couldn't really find any details. Obviously, it's their private marriage. Mm-hmm. Doesn't really matter, but I would assume that all of these things played into, you know, why it just didn't work out between them. She did move to Tennessee in 2011 to be closer to her parents, and she tried several business ventures, but none of them were successful. As of 2018, Julie was unemployed and really unsure about the future, and that's the last statement I could find from her. Tommy Lynn Sells was executed in 2014 and was never charged with Joel's murder. So, was justice really done? I mean,
yeah,
she did get acquitted eventually, and Tommy Lynn Sells did pay for his crimes, but it was never legally acknowledged that he was the one who did it, you know?
And that's the thing, too, with, like, her resume and explaining it. And, you know, if people look up stuff, I'm sure you find stuff where it's like, she did it 100%, and then you're just trying to go based off of her story. You know what I mean? Like, even if you have this certificate of innocence, I might be like, oh, well, just legally you're innocent. You're not really innocent. Like, trying to, like, convince someone you're innocent. Like, and if she does have really, really severe anxiety and PTSD, it'd probably be hard to get a job because you might have days where you're like, I can't come in, or things that are triggering, and some jobs just can't really afford to have someone who can't work, you know. So,
and I don't know what jobs she was looking for at this time, but like you said, she was getting her PhD in psychology at the time that this happened. So especially if you're seeking a job in the mental health field, again, not that that's how it should be, because people who have mental health issues are often great counselors and are able to provide those services to other people, in part because they do understand. But you do have employers who are like, okay, you're bringing too much of your own baggage in here. I can't risk that with clients that you may be working with.
Yeah, and, you know, would it get, you know, if you, say, wanted to be a therapist and you were like, okay, but I can't, you know, every therapist has some, like, I can't, you know, help someone who does this. You know, like, I had a teacher in college, and he said, I cannot be a therapist to someone who has been cruel to animals. He's like, I can't do it. That's my line. Nope, can't do it. Like, you know. So it's like, if she's like, okay, well, I can't, you know, these things are too triggering for me.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you're trying to help someone and that comes up, and then they have to find a new therapist. Like, it can get really tricky, especially when you have such severe triggers that she does, because she was beat up by our fucking justice system, basically.
Yeah, like, I mean, obviously you're traumatized when your son is murdered in your home, when you aren't able to get to him in time, which obviously this is nowhere near her fault. But I'm sure as a mother, she feels that, oh, if I would have woken up sooner, if I would have gotten there just a couple of minutes earlier, because she was able to fight with Tommy Linsells and he did eventually leave. You know, I'm sure all of that's going through her mind. That would be bad enough, not to mention going through 2 trials and a prison sentence for the murder of your son that you didn't witness exactly, but, you know, you were in the home and you tried to fight off this, like, just so much trauma after trauma after trauma. Like, it would be impossible to do anything.
Yeah, and almost, like, no time to grieve. I mean, it was, I think, 3 years before she was officially arrested, but, like, the whole time she's probably having to, like, tell people, like, no, I'm innocent, like, I didn't do this, you know. So that's really hard, and we do want to remember Joel, because that's so tragic that he was so young and lost his life. We do have another case coming up soon that's kind of similar. It might have a little connection to Tommy Linsells. It's a lot more murky of who did it. We don't know. So stay tuned for that in a few weeks.
Yes. little teaser there, but yeah, that was the heartbreaking murder of 10-year-old Joel Kirkpatrick and the wrongful conviction of Julie Rae Harper. Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
Okay, as we said, it's been a while since we recorded, and I have a bunch of perks I could pick. But yesterday, when on the street I live off of, they had this huge Pride event. There was a bunch of different vendors and drag shows and a lot of, like, different, you know, if you bought certain beers, money was donated. Just a big, happy event. And everyone showed out, and I personally did not see any protesters, and just after such a hard year and seeing everyone come out and just, like, celebrating together and being happy together. Tennessee does a lot of shitty things, and it's really discouraging sometimes, but seeing all these people out with their kids, and it made me so happy. And it is June, and I know we forgot to mention this a few episodes ago, but we want to say Happy Pride Month to all our LGBTQ listeners. We love you. We see you. Anything we can do to help you, we love you. We are so sorry the world treats you so shitty. But it was just such a nice event to go to and be able to celebrate love, because love is love. Quit hating people for who they love.
Exactly. That does sound so nice. And like you said, especially post-COVID, actually being able to get out and celebrate with other people and just show that as humans we love one another, and it's nice to get back to in-person events and just spending time with other humans and celebrating love in all of its forms. Hopefully next June, Courtney and I will plan a little bit better, so we can kind of have some content that's, you know, directly related to Pride Month. But this year we just did not plan ahead, you know. Lots of things going on this year. So next year we're on it.
I know we're like 70 episodes in, but we're still figuring this out. But we're going to figure it out better. I promise you guys. But yeah, it was just so nice. And like every single business down here just like decked their place out in like rainbow flags and hearts. And it was amazing. But yeah, so that was my perk of the week. Jaclyn, what is your perk of the week?
Well, my perk of the week obviously occurred a couple weeks ago, because we have not recorded since then. And in case you guys did not put 2 and 2 together, that we recorded a whole bunch of episodes, and then we did not. I did have my baby, so finally, I feel like it's...
Jaclyn's not pregnant anymore.
Yes. If you notice that I was able to get through a story without running out of breath, hopefully we've been good with editing where you did not notice that too much the last 9 months, but I'm sure Courtney will appreciate that editing this episode, because I didn't have to stop and just gulp tons of air into my lungs. But anyway, yes, so our little girl did join us on May 22nd. Obviously, we are so completely in love and so very happy. It's been a very tiring couple of weeks, as it is with a newborn, but 100% worth it. And, you know, obviously the best perk of the week that I'm ever going to have. So there's that.
Yeah. And by the time this is released, I will be meeting her very soon.
Yes.
So you're listening to this on a Tuesday. On this weekend, I'll be meeting her. So
yes, and
it's so weird thinking in the future like this, but
obviously there are many Perk of the Weeks that, you know, I could have chosen, but clearly that had to be the one. But also for a secondary Perk of the Week.
I mean, yeah, I was like, if she didn't say that, I'd be like, you birthed a fucking human?
But
that has to be it.
I do want to have a secondary Perk of the Week, like I like to do. I did get my first COVID vaccine and will very soon have my second COVID vaccine. So we'll be fully vaccinated by the time Courtney gets here. So lots of super exciting, wonderful, amazing things happening in our lives right now. So
yes, the future is bright after a very bleak year.
Yes.
Obviously, COVID is still around. Please be safe. Please get your vaccine.
Yes.
Don't do anything too dangerous. But yeah, if you want to tell us about your Perk of the Week, about your baby, about your COVID vaccine, about what Pride events you attended, etc., 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 you can do so on Instagram at Caffeinated Crimes Pod, on Twitter at Caff Crimes Pod, that's CAFF Crimes Pod, on Facebook at Caffeinated Crimes Podcast, or you can send us an old-fashioned email at caffeinatedcrimespod@gmail.com. If you do feel so inclined, if you want a bonus, we just had one released last week because a part 2 came out, so we're doing a bonus every month. We're being good about it, and you have the Discord and a pin and a sticker and a Google Hangout and a questions and anything else we think of between now and then. You can do so at patreon.com/caffeinatedcrimes.
And again, a very special thank you to our new patron supporter, James. Also, if you guys want a sticker and a pin, and a $10 gift card to a coffee shop of your choice, you can head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review. 5 stars is, what would be great. If you're going to leave a 1 star, just please don't bother and ignore this part of the conversation. But also, why are you still here? But anyway, so leave us a review, and once we reach 50 of those, we will do a drawing for that sticker, pin, and a gift card to a coffee shop of your choice. So make sure you go do that.
Yeah, I think we have 29 right now, so we're getting closer. We have about a 4.7 out of 5, so if you could please give us 5 stars so we can try and raise that. It looks like we had a few.
Yes.
We had a 1 star, at least one, a few 3 stars. They didn't explain why, which if you do want to give a 1 star, please just tell us why. If it's like the sound of our voices, I don't think there's a surgery to change that. I could put some auto-tune, sound like T-Pain if you want, but don't think that's better. But
I'm down for this episode. Let's do it.
And this week's Perk of the Week. I don't know. How do you sound like T-Pain? Anyway, now that I've rambled, everyone just go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.